Welcome to the Evolved Caveman podcast. I am Dr. John, the guide for your heroic journey towards greater health, success, and most importantly, happiness. And now, on with the show. Hey everybody, this is Dr. John back with the latest episode of the Evolved Caveman. And I gotta say, I'm really psyched to have with me today, Allison Pelot. And Allison is a dynamic fitness trainer and energy coach. We're gonna find out what that is, specializing in rapid permanent change through corrective exercise, metabolic nutrition, and energetic alignment. Through Allison's signature mix of humor, entertainment, and authenticity, her podcast, Integrate Yourself, has inspired thousands to approach their health and wellness in a whole new way. She is also the best-selling author of Finally Thriving. And you can find out more about that book at finallythrivingbook.com. And today, one of the reasons I'm excited about this is we're talking about self-care. So what the hell is self-care and why does it matter? Why do we beat ourselves up for not finding the time to exercise? Or we work out so hard that we come home in pain, and like joint and back pain, not the good kind of muscle pain. We struggle with diet, stress, insomnia, and that kind of health and wellness isn't relaxing, it's not joyful, and it definitely doesn't feel like self-care. So today we're going to learn how true self-care actually helps your body regenerate and recover. Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. John. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So tell me your story. How did you come to write the book? How did you get interested in this whole area?
Yes. So I have a background in holistic wellness and holistic fitness and nutrition and lifestyle training. And so I've been coaching, and I've been doing that for years. I started out as a gymnast from the age of 5 until about 22. I did it in college as well.
Wow.
And so I did, I competed for most of my youth. And so I learned a lot about the body, about the potential of the body, and really tested that out for myself as far as, what my body could do. And it was an amazing time. And I learned discipline through that. I learned what consistency can bring you to, and persistence, and the art of that, and as an athlete. And so that was amazing. As I got into my early 20s, I had a somewhat crisis of self because I stopped doing gymnastics, which it was really all I had known up to that point. And in a way, I wasn't prepared for the identity shift that I went through. So I lost that part of myself that I identified heavily with. And then I was like, who am I? So it was a little bit of hopefully I can cuss a little bit on your show. Can I
please.
say shit show? It was a little bit of a shit show.
Shitsy, that's tame. That's like light.
Yeah. So, my early 20s, my 20s really were, it wasn't that fun for me. So, because I didn't really realize at the time what was happening. But
it's interesting, if I can jump in there for a second.
Sure.
It's such a classic story where I've talked with so many elite athletes where exact same story, right? You quit or resign or step away from the sport that you loved, which was 80, 90, 95% of your identity. It gave you structure. It gave you everything up to that point, a social life, diet, whatever it was. And then you step away from it, and then intense self-doubt, depression, grieving, like all these things that come about from it. And I just want to drive that message home for any younger athletes out there that are listening, that to me, that's a normal part of the process. It's not enjoyable, but it's expected.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It was definitely that for me. I did experience all of what you mentioned. And it just brought me into realizing that, oh my God, I need to work on some stuff. What's going on here? It was a very confusing time for me. So it wasn't really till later, after I had kids, in my late 20s, early 30s, I started having these severe digestive issues. And I was like, well, I'm used to doing everything physically, and taking care of my body physically, but I had no idea how to bring in the food component, how to bring in the emotional component of health and those kinds of things. And So what I had to do from there was really learn the holistic principles to my health and wellness, those foundational principles, and brought in nutrition, organic nutrition, and learned how to really get my digestion back on track, because it was surprising how, I would go to doctors and they would give me an antacid or something and it would never fix it. And I was like, well, oh my God, this isn't, I've got to find something that works because I can't function. So I finally was able to heal myself through just changing my nutrition. And that was amazing to me. That was one of the things that made me think, well, what else is there, that I could learn about? So I went on a journey of learning about my emotional and, intelligence and how I could navigate that. And over the years, as a trainer, helping other people do this, and with their training them with fitness and nutrition, I've been able to help them also navigate emotions, because if you have anybody listening who's been an athlete or a trainer before, they know that when you move the body, you start to move emotions through. But as an athlete, I really had to suppress my emotions. So I wasn't used to being able to navigate them, because I had just pushed them away and was just kind of numbing them out and disassociating from them. Because in my sport, you're not really allowed to show emotion. You have to really push through the pain, both physically, emotionally, mentally. And so to some extent, I got to this place in my life where I had been numbing out for so long, I didn't even know how to feel at that point in my life, right? So I started seeing this in my clients too. Like as they would move, these emotions would come through and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is also, I'm experiencing this as well as I go through this journey of learning how to feel again, right? And so, it's amazing how much we store in our body to survive. And so my book is called Finally Thriving. And I realized that surviving, sometimes the survival mode itself can be very subtle. It's something that we don't always, like, we think it's so obvious, like, yeah, you're breathing up through your chest. You're running from a lion, those kinds of responses. But there's also that subtleness of survival where we suppress our emotions, or we have unresolved trauma from our childhood that keeps running the show subconsciously. So in order for us to be able to thrive, we want to resolve what is actually driving us from the inside, right? So what we also can call that book on the shelf that just stays up there until you take it down, right? So I go through a process in my book of connecting with the inner child, like I was able to do. So I had to connect with those parts of myself that didn't get, so I call it the inner child. Sometimes when we're kids, we don't get our needs met, or we have some story that gets passed down to us, or a projection from another adult. And then we take that to heart. And so we take that into our adulthood. Now, as an adult, you might look back on the story and say, well, that's, I can understand that now, because it from an adult perspective, now it's understandable why my parents got divorced or why they acted that way. But if you have not resolved it, it can still be an emotion or a feeling that's running in the background that's actually what's in charge of your actions, right? Or how you feel or how you respond to life. So this can be that subtle survival mode that that keeps running. So,
let me jump in there, Allison, if I can. Give us, give me an example of how you turn towards and soothe your own inner child. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have an example in the book. The way I started this was if something would come up for me in my life, like something that felt uncomfortable, or if I got triggered, or if some kind of emotion came up, what I would do when I was younger is I would push it down. I would suppress it. I wouldn't feel it. But now, I let it come up. I feel it. What does this feel like? And I ask myself, okay, what age does this feel like? Where did this come up for me? And I'll just, whatever number pops into my head first is the one I go with, because you want to just trust your intuition that what's coming up for you is right. And the more that you practice that, the better and the easier it gets. So I'll go with that age, and then I'll feel into it, and I'll feel into what that feeling or emotion, what did that remind me of in my childhood? And sometimes a memory will come up, and then I will have a meditation where I am noticing, I am seeing that, for example, that 7-year-old right in front of me, she's standing there, and I will ask her, what are you needing right now from me? What are you needing? And you can think of yourself as the parent and your inner child as your child. And so you can have a conversation and make it as simple as possible, because your inner child's always going to be, the conversation's always going to be very simple. And the needs that your inner child needs are always going to be simple as well, because it usually comes down to a safety security thing, like something that happened in our youth where we didn't feel safe. And so what you can just do is a meditation where you're connecting with that age of yourself, and you're just having a conversation. And it's like I said, a parent and a child conversation, and asking them, what are they needing right now? And it could just be as simple as just to be held, or just to be loved, or just to feel safe, and then you're acknowledging that, and then you're giving that. And now you are parenting your inner child so that they can play, and so that you can be inspired by their creativity instead of them running the show in the background. So really the inner child is your subconscious, but the subconscious sometimes is a very abstract way to connect with yourself. So I like to use the inner child, because of course we're going to be kind and loving to our inner children, right? And so that's the approach I take with it.
I thank you for that. I love what you're saying, and I agree. I think of it, and I was going to make a joke about multiple personality. Like, how do you know you're not multiple personality when you're talking to different aspects of yourself, like I do?
You don't.
But now at this point in my career, I think of us as having, like maybe a 5, 6, 7-year-old. I think of myself as having a 5, 6, 7-year-old John in my head, and maybe a 15-year-old kind of surly, defiant, angry teenage John. And then there's the functional adult John. And I remember one of those instances you were talking about where I didn't feel safe and secure when I was a kid. I got lost in a canyon in Arizona, and I was all by myself. And I'll keep the story short, but I had to scramble up the side of a very steep canyon all by myself. I didn't even know where I was. And luckily I saw the house where we were staying. So I ran to the house, and I was crying and panicked. And I told nobody about it, because I felt like it was just as likely that my mom would be angry with me as she would to be nurturing, because it was unpredictable. And so in my memory, I went back, and my adult self met my 6-year-old self at the top of the canyon, and just scooped him up, gave him a big hug, and said, I got you. You're safe. Take a deep breath. You're going to be fine. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of times it does have to do with safety and security.
Absolutely. And you did that was a wonderful demonstration of exactly what I'm talking about. You're giving yourself what you didn't get in that moment, right? You're meeting those needs, which you can meet at any point. It doesn't have to be. What's
strange too, I felt you feel a release.
Yes.
When you do it, you're like, it's an exhale, an exhalation. It's relaxation. It's like,
exactly.
Like
because you were holding that before, right? It was in your nervous system.
It's fascinating. And what happens is, I think what you're talking about is it's kind of like those accumulation of little traumas that accumulate into a big trauma and activate that sympathetic nervous system or the stress response. And so that means we're either always or easily in fight or flight, or always or easily on lookout for threat.
Exactly.
And that's not a great way to go through life.
No, it's not. No,
that is not thriving.
That's why I wrote the book. Yeah, because I just thought like, wow, there's so many aspects to this. And also thriving for everybody's different as they relate to thriving. Like for one person, thriving might mean something different, So that's why I wanted to give people an opportunity to have their own individual journey through this and how it relates to their wellness. Because like you say, John, is yes, it affects our sympathetic nervous system and our, these things that we don't really place a lot of importance on, they are running the show, right?
Well, that's just it. We become automatons. We become mindless. We become creatures of, I think we are deeply creatures of habit, which sucks if we're being led by negative, destructive habits. If we can harness that power so that we're being led by positive, pro-social habits that support us, that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
But that takes some work to get there, I would argue.
Well, and the thing is, we're also led to believe that, and not to say that there's not, I think, our habits, our healthy habits aren't important. Of course they are. But if we're just doing all this stuff externally and not really going within and addressing what's, the root of what's happening, then you're just, it's surface level healing. It's not really getting to the, like I said, the root of the cause,
But Allison, I can hear many of my listeners thinking at this moment, the Anne Lamott quote of, "My mind is like a scary neighborhood into which I am afraid to go alone." And it's scary. So I don't want to go there.
Oh, I totally understand that. And I get it. I've been in some scary places and places I did not want to go. I totally get that. The idea here behind what I'm sharing is more about not really digging up old trauma or re-experiencing pain. Your inner child doesn't really want to do that, and nor is it necessary. Okay, they've already experienced that pain. What we want to move toward is more so the liberation aspect of it, right? So we want to liberate that inner child so that they can now experience joy and love and creativity, and they can go and just play like a kid would want to do. They don't really want to be burdened with all this adult stuff. So it's about more of a liberation rather than digging up old trauma and re-experiencing the trauma. Because sometimes people do get scared when you say inner child work. They're like, oh my God, no, I don't want to go there again. Of course you don't. Like, why would you? There's no reason for that. But a lot of people will have people go back and revisit the trauma. And my approach is more, let's liberate them, because then you take, I don't know if control is the right word, but you take the reins, because now you are parenting, you're learning how to parent yourself, which ultimately our parents were here to teach us how to parent ourselves, because we become our own parent. We kind of take what they teach us and we take care of ourselves that way. We become our own mother. We become our own father. We learn how to nurture ourselves. We learn how to create healthy boundaries, and take inspired action. But not all of us got those healthy relationships with our parents. Sometimes our parents didn't know how to parent us either. And so they did the best they could. So
a lot of times, if I can jump in there, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I see a lot of clients get stuck on or in anger at their parents because their parents didn't parent them in the way they felt they should have been parented or wanted to be parented, which I think is almost true for everybody out there to some extent. I know that we differ in degrees, but one of the things I look at is sort of generational progression when people get stuck there and just, okay, well, how did your grandpa parent your father?
Right.
And how much did your father improve on how he was parented when he was parenting you? And I think that's kind of the best we can hope for, is generational progression. And I think if you look at it at that light, oftentimes, but not always, you'll see that there was in fact progress. And
Absolutely.
while it's not fantastic parenting many times, it was better. And I think that can help loosen that anger sometimes.
I agree. Yeah. And it's about compassion, right? So yes, you might go through a stage of anger, which might be necessary in the very beginning. But then ultimately you do want to not have to be rejecting your parents all the time. You want to make peace with your parents and the job they did. Otherwise, you're just going to be in that mode of rejection, and you'll never have that compassion, that love for them. And that's going to impede your relationship with yourself as well. So it's going to also affect that. So my advice is to find a way to make peace with that through compassion. I did family constellation work, which helped tremendously. And that's that was my start to healing my relationship with my parents. And then I come full circle around to just so much love and appreciation for their care for me, their love for me in their own way. You know, they weren't
what
perfect.
They did and what they could offer.
Exactly. And so that's what I think, if you can come to that place, then you can, anything's possible.
And I think that's a huge shift, to go from I'm angry and resentful at my parents for what they didn't give to me. Right. To full circle, or 180 degrees, to I'm appreciative and grateful to my parents for what they could offer to me. Yeah. And that changes everything. Absolutely. I mean, so their mistakes also made who you are, right? So that's another part of it to look at. Yeah. Yeah, it's your whole story. So there's a few other things I want to get to, and I'm aware of time. We only got about 25 minutes left. Oh, yeah, sure. But there's a few things I want to touch on here, so I apologize for derailing you there. That's okay. I want to talk about this default state of mind. You mentioned that it's important to know your default state of mind before you try to improve things. How do we become aware of that default state of mind? How do we tap into that? Yeah. And what is it, I suppose? Yeah. So the default mode is what I call it in my book. And it's basically what you say to yourself 90% of the time. Like, are you a half full glass person or half empty glass person? You know? So and again, it's like, it's kind of switching over to optimism in a very authentic way, right? A very genuine way, like that you're being honest with yourself about. But the first step to that is to change the words that you say to yourself every day. Like 90% of the time, are you criticizing yourself? Are you judging yourself? Are you saying to yourself, I shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't, can't, don't, want? Are you using a lot of these words? These are what we call conflict language, because for example, if you really want you want to build wealth or abundance in your life, but you're saying, well, I can't do that because I shouldn't do that. Really, making money is bad, or whatever it is that you're associating that with, then that's going to be conflicting what you really want to create. So that kind of language is what we call conflict language, which you can actually simply change by just switching over to what we call architect language, which is I am, I get to, I want to. So now you're owning what you're creating through your language, through your thoughts. It sounds really simple, but if we can think of it like this, like what we have in our minds is our vision board for life. It's basically our ultimate creative tool. Then if we change our focus on what we want to move towards, and we create direction and purpose with that and intention, then you're going to end up creating more of what you want instead of less of what you want. So people tend to focus more on what they don't want, and they talk about it a lot, and they think about it a lot. But then when they do that, they're creating more of that. That's just simply what happens, because that's where their focus is going. So if we can even just start to change how we talk to ourselves,
that can be a huge first step there.
Yeah, and it sounds like you were touching a little bit on realistic optimism in the beginning there, which I think is profoundly life-changing. Just learning how to interpret sort of bad situations, bad outcomes, as well as positive situations and positive outcomes with an optimistic lens. And as long as it's not life-threatening or life or death. If it's high stakes, go ahead, be cautious, be a little pessimistic. I'm having surgery. I'm optimistic. No, my guy's not a quack.
Well, you have to be optimistic in that too. I mean, you don't have to, but it's nice to be that way. Yeah, because
but do your research first.
You've got to. Okay, so you definitely have to be mindful of it, right? And go and make an informed decision. That's important too, right? Yeah. We don't want to just go into each situation like, oh, it's all going to work out. Of course, you have to take the action steps and take the responsibility and to be fully accountable in each situation that you take part in. So that's definitely part of it. But what, I guess the reason I put that in there too is I wanted people just to reflect on how optimistic they're experiencing their lives and as opposed to negatively. So, and that's important. It is a way we can train ourselves. We can train our brain to start thinking more openly. It's really just opening yourself up to more possibilities is really what it comes down to. But we tend to close ourselves off and limit ourselves when we feel like we have a low sense of self-worth or we have low confidence in ourselves. So we're just trying to take ourselves off the hook. And so we create all these, excuses or limitations so that we don't have to show up for ourselves. So that's how I see it. This is the first step for you to start training your brain to be more open to more of what you want to create.
Yeah. And I agree with what you're saying. It strikes me also though that, that you describe it as the default state of mind. I just think of it as kind of the thought stream of an untrained mind.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that there's a level that we might have to work on first before that, which is self-awareness. And, Tasha Urich's doing some interesting work around this where 95% of us will self-report that we are highly self-aware. But when we drill down into it, it turns out to be only about 10 to 15%. And so I think a lot of us say, well, of course I'm self-aware. Why wouldn't I be? I know everything about myself. Who's a better expert than me on me? And I think that many of us don't understand why we do what we do. And we have very little awareness of the thoughts that go through our heads and definitely of the emotions that go through our bodies.
Absolutely. And the way I think of self-awareness is less knowing everything about yourself and everybody else. It's more of not knowing and being okay with that and trusting. It's more of just being open. It's like opening yourself up to that, like what I call in my book, childlike curiosity. So being curious, being aware, just being aware is noticing what you didn't notice before, right? What are you seeing now that you didn't see before? So that's what we're stepping into. And that then you can start noticing more synchronicities in your life too.
Yeah.
So all those
curiosity is a big deal. Choose, and that's simply a decision to choose to be more curious.
Absolutely.
And that's a game changer as well. So let me move on because I want to get to, I think this is a really important topic. And you urge readers to get clear on their values. So why are values important and how do you suggest getting clear on values?
Yeah, values are very foundational and, we can get pulled in all kinds of directions, especially, in current times. With beliefs, with other people's values. And as it relates to our health, it's very important to know what you value as opposed to other people. It doesn't matter what other people value. It matters mostly what you value. And then you're differentiating that also between what your parents valued, which you might have different values. You might have similar values, but it's just bringing that awareness piece to that part. and asking yourself, well, what are my values? Because many people don't even know this, right? And so maybe you can create some values with this exercise as well. But I always have my clients write 3 to 5 values for themselves and then put them up where they can see them, so that they are reminded by those values. Because, until you make a change in your life, a healthy lifestyle change, and you really get that down to where you don't even have to think about it anymore, you may have to remind yourself of that for a little bit, like this is a value that I want to start taking on here. So let me remind myself. Another value you could have would be a less tangible value than, say, like an organic, like I only eat organic food. I love eating organic food. That could be a value, but also a value could be, I am now going to be more honest with myself and others about where I stand on things, and just about what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with, or whatever it is, you're going to bring honesty in as a value, or integrity. Those kinds of things can also be values, or consistency, inspired action. So whatever it is you feel like, it could be something you already value. It could be something you want to take on as a new value too. So just becoming aware of that is foundational, because what that does is it sets the stage for everything you do in your life, the people you hang around, the choices you make, how you prioritize your time. It's all going to relate to your personal values.
Yeah. And I think, values to me are a big deal. And I think of them as kind of the guardrails for our behavior. And
yes.
I think they come most into play at decision points in our lives, or at those moments when the emotional mind is trying to come out in that third of a second before it takes over from your rational mind.
Yes.
And I like the idea, and I'm always trying to learn more about values because they're vague and kind of, difficult to pin down sometimes. So I like the idea of, coming up with your top 2 or 3 values and then working to operationalize them.
Yes.
So, what does it look like if I'm living by this value, what does it look like when I'm not living by this value? So for an example, let's say I value family really highly. So maybe operationalizing it means that I don't stay for drinks with the single woman that I'm working with after work.
Yeah.
And how do I know when I'm not living by it? Like, well, if I'm golfing 18 holes every Saturday and Sunday after working full time Monday through Friday, that's probably not me really prioritizing family. Something like that, I think, is a really good exercise.
Absolutely. Those are great examples. And, also, differentiating, like prioritizing self, like how can I fit myself in there? Mm-hmm. And my family, like maybe just seeing, like where you can prioritize those things as well. Like how can I prioritize this value in my life, and on down the list. And go ahead.
One of the things that I see with a lot of businessmen that I work with is if one of my top values is family, then I'm going to put my phone away while I'm playing with my 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I'm going to stop thinking about business, and I'm going to be as present as I can for as long as I can with them, because, I like the idea that time and attention are the currency of relationship. And a lot of times we're playing with our children, and yet we're not really present. We're not really there when we're there. And just another way to operationalize that.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a great point. Many times it's hard for people to even be present with other people and themselves. And that's a training within itself. Mm-hmm. So I recommend prioritizing time with yourself. Start to learn how to be with yourself without doing other things, thinking about other stuff, just noticing small things that you didn't notice before. But it all goes back to the trauma, the resolving trauma, because if we still have that unresolved trauma going on in the background, it's really hard to be present with other people, because we're always thinking about other things, or we're trying to, externalize it, through busyness and all of that. So that might be one thing to reflect back on if you are having a hard time being present.
Mm-hmm. So there's one other area that I want to touch on that this fascinates me as well. One of the things you advise the readers in the book on is learning how to receive.
Yes.
So I have an idea, an inkling what that means, but give us some more info on that.
So generally speaking, receiving is more of the feminine, right? So you and I talked a little bit before, and
masculine versus feminine. Yeah.
Yeah. And how feminine is, you don't really want to tell most guys be more feminine because like, they're not going to want to do that. Right. Because that seems to be, negative, we're
not socialized in that direction yet.
Yeah.
Kind of discouraged. But I do think what we're trying to do ultimately is balance our masculine and feminine sides.
That's right. I just
don't say that out loud very often because men are like, oh, fuck that.
They don't have a feminine. What are you talking about? I don't have a feminine.
I'm not feminine. No
but
pussy.
All people have feminine. They have feminine and masculine. Women have masculine too. And so I tend to think of the giving and receiving, they go hand in hand. They need each other to exist. And they're also a reflection of the feminine and the masculine. So receiving, you have to know how to receive in order to give unconditionally. So most men, especially, like they're giving, they're supporting, they're holding, when are they able to receive? It's like there has to be that time, right? When they can do that. Same with women. It's the same deal. Like we're in a society where we all are about doing, we're all about giving, but rarely do we learn how to really receive. So in order for you to give in an inspired way, in a way that feels good for you, where you don't feel like you need anything back from it, you have to learn how to receive first, because then you'll know what it's like to receive when you give to someone, right? So plus it's really nice to receive so that you can nourish yourself. So we can do that through many different ways. It doesn't have to be just through a gift or receiving something in a relationship from another person. It can be you just receiving your food well. It could be you receiving a nice glass of water, or something that really feels good for your body. It could be you just taking in nature, or
compliment.
A compliment.
It could be sex. I mean, I've seen men struggle with all these.
Totally.
Right? Like, just lay back and receive this sexual gift from your partner.
Well, that's a great.
I can't do that. Like, what? Like,
well, like, how do you feel? That's actually a great example to reflect on. Is like, where are you with that? Are you really comfortable giving but not receiving, or vice versa? That's a great reflection. Is
it out of balance?
Yeah.
And the other thing I've seen with men over the years is compliments. We suck at receiving compliments. Now, maybe it's not just men. I target men.
But I
think it can be all of us. But we come up with so many ways to discredit the sincerity of the compliment giver.
Yeah.
Oh, they're just blowing smoke up my ass. They don't really mean that. They don't know. Oh, they don't know me. Like all that stuff. And I think it makes us uncomfortable. Sometimes it can embarrass us, but it's such a struggle and such an excellent practice to work on taking a compliment in, believing it's sincere, believing that they see the positive in you better than you do in yourself, and just accepting it into your heart and sitting with it for a few seconds.
Yeah.
That's a great practice right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It can start with anything, really. I mean, even if someone gives you something, you don't like the gift or it's not a great gift, just receive it with grace. It's like, it's about how you receive it, right?
Let me ask you this. Oh, sorry to interrupt. So have you ever been in a relationship, and maybe this was early on, where the person loved you a lot and would do kind, thoughtful, nurturing, loving acts for you, and it was hard to receive them?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a reflection of the person's ability to receive too. When, if it makes you feel uncomfortable.
I think self-worth too, partly.
Yeah.
If I look back at my past.
Well, I think for me too, I was always like, as an athlete, and some men may be able to relate to this, is I was really taught to be tough, and so therefore, if you're really tough, you're not gonna soften up to receive a compliment or something, because that's a softening, right? That's a feminine quality. Yeah. And so you have to be open. You can't be resistant to receive anything in life, so that's a part of it. It's like a softening. Like you can't be, it's not a tough thing. It's like it's more of just an allowing energy, a surrender energy to be able to take a compliment. And
we're better at doing than being. And I think it's a part of being to soften, open up, and receive.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more passive in a way, but it's not.
It's totally passive. Yeah. And it's very powerful. It's actually, again, you need the giving and the receiving. They work together. And therefore you take yourself off the hook when you can do that receiving, when you can work on that as a practice, because then you don't have that heavy obligation to give. Like you can actually give with no obligation. You can give unconditionally.
Yeah, what a concept.
Yeah.
You can give without expectation of receiving something back. It's not tit for tat, which is a shitty way to live a relationship. By the way.
That's how we've been living until now, right? Yeah.
I'm at 100. You're at 75. I'm winning.
It's all about more competition. Yeah.
And you as an athlete know about that.
I do. And that's how I learned. Yeah. But
how high did you, where did you compete, or where did you do gymnastics in college?
I did it at Radford University. It was a Division I school. They no longer have the program, but I was there for 3 years, and then I decided I wanted to end on a good year, and I didn't finish out the last year. I transferred to Georgia State University for exercise science. So, I was in club gymnastics for a very long time. We were on a traveling team, and we would travel every weekend to a different city. And then I ended up getting a scholarship at Radford University for gymnastics there.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So congratulations. Are you familiar with Dan Millman?
Yes, he's in my book, actually.
Oh, you're kidding. Yeah. So Jory, my fiance, and I went to a retreat with him in Costa Rica. She's been on several with him.
Oh, wow.
For those that don't know, Dan Millman wrote The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, as well as 14, 15 other books, some of which are just outstanding. Way of the Peaceful Warrior is outstanding. But he used to be a gymnastic cow and had a terrible fracture in his lower leg. Yeah. And the doctor said he'd never walk again, let alone compete. And somehow he, I think through blending West and East healing practices, he managed to compete one more time. And I think took second at nationals off of the rings, which, to land off the rings on a questionable leg and stick the landing is absurd. It was an amazing story. And the man or the person or whoever, we're not sure what it is. Socrates. That was an amazing connection there too. I think he said he just wrote a most recent book that just came out a month or two ago. That's I think it's autobiographical.
Okay.
Where he says that Socrates is in truth pieces of him. Pieces of himself.
Okay. That makes sense.
Along the way.
Yeah.
Because people have asked him for years, who is Socrates?
Who is that guy?
Real? Did you meet him? The guy at the old abandoned gas station.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm thrilled that you know him. He's a great guy.
Well, I don't know him personally, but I love the book and the movie. And I actually, there's a chapter called The Crumbling in my book about that. It relates to that story, The Peaceful Warrior. Yeah. So it
was amazing at this retreat. He actually did a handstand on a folding chair. So his arms are uneven at the age of 70.
What? Oh, and my gosh.
I always struggled with handstands on the ground, and
That's amazing.
At any age.
Well, I guess, I still have my handstand. So I guess you never lose it. It's one of those things you do a million of when you're in gymnastics. And so if that's the one thing that I can do, I guess that's pretty good, but
it's impressive to me.
But the fact that he could do it on a chair at 70, now that's even more impressive. Yeah. That's amazing.
It was an interesting retreat. It was good stuff. So let me ask you this. I'm aware of time. I know that you've got a hard stop here coming up. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have?
Gosh, I've never been asked that question before. I would, I don't know. Can we touch upon the crumbling chapter really quick with people?
Please. That'd be great if you've got time.
Yeah, I've got time. So that chapter was inspired by the last 2 or 3 years here, 2.5, I guess, coming up on, of our reality crumbling, and the way that it happened with Dan Millman in the story, The Peaceful Warrior. How his reality of his really the crumbling is your identity, right? Mm-hmm. How you see yourself, who you thought you were, what you thought you could do, and all of these things. And so those identities crumble, and then we were left with thinking, well, who am I now? This is a crisis of self. And it's an opportunity, though, too, for us to go deeper into all those aspects we talked about today, but also to really reflect on what you want in your life, what you would like to create, how you would like to be, what you would like to feel. We're always going to have the choice of doing it that way. And so that was that chapter symbolized what I went through as well in many different phases of my life. But as a collective, I felt like we all had a very common experience of our realities changing during that time, during the pandemic. And I felt like, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to reflect on what is working, what isn't working in our lives, and how we would like to change that. And what, magic and synchronicities could come from that if we just look at things a different way. And we could reflect on and more of what is working, what we could move towards. So that was the idea behind that chapter. And Dan's book really inspired me. I remember I like to listen to audiobooks. So I was listening to the audiobook, and at the end I was in the airplane listening to it, and I was just, tears were just running down my face. I'm like, people are going to look at me like, what is she crying about? But it was just so emotionally, I was so emotional at the end of it, because I was just like, oh my God, yes, this is what we're here for. It's amazing. It's amazing, the opportunity, if we can just see it. And the experiences we could have are just, yeah. Yeah.
And just to bring this full circle, I think I can. So one of the things that I tell elite athletes when they step away from the sport they love, and they have that identity crisis, because it's obviously a huge part of their life, is imagine speaking to your younger self, the 4-year-old self. And it could be, maybe a 4-year-old cousin, maybe a 4-year-old daughter or son or whatever it is, but a young person. Mm-hmm. And if you ask them why they love you, the answers are going to be things like, because you're kind, because I trust you, because you're funny, because you spend time with me. They don't have anything to do with the sport you just left, right. Nor does your identity.
Right.
So I get that that's a big piece of you, but to understand that there's you are so much bigger than the sport that you were.
Yeah, it's just something you did. It's not who you are. And that's what we're coming to realize is like, we're connecting with that essence, that true energy of who we are, not what we do. But before we were connecting more of like, okay, what you do is who you are. But no, it's not. It's how you show up, right? The energy you bring to the table.
That relationship with the inner child is bidirectional. I just realized. So you support them, let them know they're safe and secure, they can sometimes support you and say, hey, look, I love you because of these values or these traits, not because of what you do to make money or because you're a professional soccer player.
That's right. They will inspire you. They'll inspire your inner creativity. And my 5-year-old was just like ready to go. She was like, let's go. Let's do this. She's ready to create and have fun and play. And so that was my inspiration for really starting this whole thing. It was my 5-year-old.
Well, Allison, I'm glad you started because it led you here into this conversation, and I've greatly enjoyed it.
Oh, me too. Thank you, John. This has been an honor. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
And so much fun. Yeah.
So once again, for the listeners, the book is Finally Thriving, and you can find out more at finallythrivingbook.com. And Allison, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for the rest of you who are listening, thank you so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, share if you loved the conversation today. If you didn't love the conversation, you don't have to do a damn thing. That's it. This is Dr. John signing off. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Evolved Caveman podcast. If you like what you've heard, support us by subscribing, leaving reviews, and sharing the podcast with friends and colleagues. For the latest, most powerful tools to connect with like-minded men, join the Facebook group at The Evolved Caveman. Follow Dr. John on Instagram at The Evolved Caveman, all one word, or join the email list by visiting guidetoself.com.